In this lesson, we're going to go through the extremities of ТиТач, including the ear ТиТач, tail ТиТач, belly lifts, and the leg exercises that we do, including touches. So the ears are something that many people do instinctively. You'll often find that if your dog comes and puts her head in your lap, one of the first things that you often do is just start to actually stroke the ears. Now, it really has a lot of health benefits as well. So what we do kind of intuitively with many dogs can also really help boost their immune system and just help keep them improve their well-being. So what we can do is we can slide our fingers from the base to the tip so that we cover the whole ear in parallel slides. In emergencies, you may find that you can stroke the ears a little bit more firmly and a little bit quicker. So that's when you're on your way to the vet, if you've had some kind of an accident with your dog and you really want to help keep them with you. So the benefits of the ear ТиТач can help to settle a nervous animal. And this is really helpful in the cases of noise sensitivity, thunder and lightning, fireworks and so on, guns going off. Can help with digestive issues, the same for people. We have the same kind of acupressure points and so on in the ears. Car sickness can much help settle the stomach. While you're taking your dog to the vet in some sort of an emergency situation or just to settle them if they're nervous. During whelping, if you should have a bitch that is in whelp, can help them recover. So if they're really tired, especially if it's their first litter. And it can help animals come out of anesthetic more smoothly. So we find that quite a few vet nurses will use that in a way of helping the animals just be a little bit more comfortable coming out of an anesthetic. So how do we do it? Well, a lot of it will depend on your dog's acceptance of ear handling. And that can make a difference if you've had a dog that has had many ear infections, so they've had to have a lot of drops put in the ears and so on. You can still help them. You just have to do a little bit of a non-habitual or a sort of novel approach to them. So we often will start, here's my friend again, with either a little bit of the llama touch or the chimp touch. I often like to start down on the neck rather than going right for the ears, unless your dog is really comfortable with their ears being handled. And I work up around the jaw, which is similar to how we will work with the mouth work as well. And then what I like to do is either start with some raccoon touches around the base of the ear. And the base of the ear, there's an acupressure point called the triple heater, the triple warmer meridian, and it runs from the front just above the eye and around the ear. And it actually runs all the way down the front leg. And this can help to really activate the parasympathetic nervous system in terms of relaxation. Can also help to balance the digestive, the reproductive, and the respiratory system. So this work with these little touches, these little raccoon touches around the base of the ear is really beneficial for your dog's overall well-being. Now we can also stroke, and if your dog's comfortable, ideally if we kind of start at the middle of the head and we can stroke out to the tips of the ears in little lines. We could also do raccoon touches from the base to the tip. Now this is all going to depend on your dog's level of comfort with having their ears handled. Of course, if you have a long-eared dog, what you want to do is make sure that you're supporting maybe with one hand and doing touches with the other. That is really important. And with some dogs, I just take my hand right underneath the ear. So especially a heavy-eared dog, and it's like I'm moving the sort of the tissue around the ear, and this gives the dog just a different experience. And of course, if they've had ear infections, I often start in the jaw area and just do little bits of touch and then give them a pause. You want to let them experience this new feeling so that they're comfortable with what you're doing and that they know that you're going to stop. Sometimes we start doing something and we're so excited that they're letting us do it that we forget that they need to know that they don't have to do anything to actually make us stop. So that's something that's really important. Now, if you have a very, like a short uppy-eared dog, you want to make sure that you're following the line that the ear wants to go in naturally. So a long-eared dog, I'm not pulling the ears up, and a pointy-eared dog, I'm not going to pull them down. Now, what I have found helpful sometimes with the long-eared dogs is to take the ear against the head and just do some touches with the underneath side of the ear on the jaw. And I have found that that is can be quite acceptable for dogs, especially if they have had ear infections. So it's a different experience for them. So here are some pictures of starting with the, in the upper left, I'm using the chimp touch around the ear. And that is sometimes a really nice way to start. And in the middle top picture, my hand is under the ear, and I've just gently moving that tissue and then stroking down from the middle of the head all the way down to the tip of the ear. So right here you can see that, and my hand is really open, so it's very soft, and the movement kind of comes from my arm rather than really pushing with using really my hand. And I'm supporting the ear up here, and once again sliding down the ear. So mouth ТиТач. Well, why might you use it? It's really one of the closest connections that we have to the limbic system, which is the primary controller of really your basic primitive needs. And so if dogs' emotional needs are, if they're really out of balance emotionally, you see it expressed in the mouth, for instance. And the same with people. I think that dogs and horses and people have an extreme tendency of displaying things through the mouth. That old saying, keep a stiff upper lip. Well, we usually do that when we're like really fine, which isn't fine at all. And so we can see that in dogs. They may tighten their lips. Some dogs will growl. Some will lift their lips. Some dogs smile. So there's a lot of emotion that's expressed through the mouth. Can be very helpful with mouthy puppies. So they're often mouthy because they're teething, and with teething you could take a cold or a frozen piece of cloth or washcloth and do touches on the gums. That can be extremely helpful. For basic handling by the vet, teeth brushing, if you show dogs so that the vets can actually examine the mouth, very helpful for fear, hyperactivity, or nervousness. Also for chronic barkers, chewers, and biting. Now, the thing to remember with the mouth work is really you want to do moments and not minutes. And it's, if you just take a little bit, do that drip feeding, especially with puppies. And it might literally be a couple of touches. I generally contain them so that their rear end is kind of between my legs. If I'm sitting on the ground, I do a little touch. I'm going to pretend this is a puppy right here. I do a little bit of touch, maybe on the side of the face. My hands are free because they're contained between my legs, and then I let them go. So you do little bits of it, and I find that they'll often come back. The same thing when you're doing with any dog is just don't do it for too long. Don't expect to you're not going to necessarily see the result immediately. You usually see some result as you go along. So how do we start? Well, if we start again with touches around the head and jaw, and I like to either use the lying leopard, so I'm using the first two flanges, or the chimp is nice because it's less sort of surface area to make contact. And this is where we might use the owl, which is making a circle with your thumb and index finger and just using the side of your hand to do touches around this area. It's just a little bit less threatening or grabby than if we're using our fingers extended. You can support the head gently with a second hand. Just make sure that you're not like grabbing it, and it just helps to kind of contain a little bit as we work towards the outside of the mouth. So this is where, again, I could use a little lying leopard, or I might use a little bit of chimp. In some cases, I've taken a paintbrush and done touches around the outside of the face with the paintbrush. This is going to depend on how comfortable your dog is with the approach to the mouth. The next step that I like to use is if I can just get a dog to rest their chin in my hand. I find there's a huge amount of trust that goes along with this. And then what I do is I one side and then the other. So with the thumb, I just come in under the lip, do just a few touches and come back. And then the same on the other side, going in with the fingers and then resting. Just remember to take it slowly rather than overdoing it. If you find the mouth is really dry, wet your fingers a little bit so that it doesn't kind of catch on the mouth. So here are some pictures. Working behind the dog's head, that's the safest way to do it and allows your dog to have the feeling that there's an escape route rather than that they're trapped. So in the upper left, this is showing the chimp touch from behind the dog's head. My left hand is just gently supporting the head. The middle one is showing the owl around the jaw again, and then with the chimp moving down towards the mouth. Here I am cradling her head in my hand and then doing some touches with my thumb under one side. And then I've gone in with the back of my finger on one side, and then my finger still on her right side. Now we move on to the tail. So you can see we're kind of getting the different extremities. We've gone the ears to the mouth and now to the tail. So some of the issues that the tail work is very beneficial for is issues of noise phobia, so thunder, fireworks, gunshots, fear of strangers. And think about this as well. The tail also has a posture to it. And that posture is really often is expressing the emotional state that a dog might be in. So if they're in a high state of arousal, the tail may be up and really tight. If they're feeling quite nervous and unsure, the tail may be tucked between their legs. That is going to depend somewhat on your dog's natural tail set. But I think when you get to know your dog, you'll know the difference of when that happens in terms of the change. So fear of new places, timidity or aggression, because we see those both extremes as actually coming from the same place. And usually it's from a place of fear. So what we find is that we can help the balance, the physical and emotional balance, adding to this some of the work through the elements, which can also help to improve the gait, which is the tail work can be very, very helpful with improving gait and also confidence building. Can also help to reduce stress. And with some ailments of aging, back problems, arthritis, or hip dysplasia. So this is all done very gently, and just the dog has to accept this. This is not about us saying this is good for you. This is really exploring what's acceptable for the dog. So there's different ways we can start, and a lot of that's going to depend on the shape of your dog's tail. You'll see in the photographs that I'm using a dog, the Dalmatian again, with a longer tail. So I can do touches. First of all, I start around the hindquarters. I don't go directly to the tail. So working your way back with the dog, noticing what their response is when you get around the tail. What we've noticed is that dogs that are especially nervous of loud noises and thunder and lightning will often sit down as soon as you get down to the tail, or even around the hindquarters in some cases. So this, again, you see, it's a change in posture. So there's maybe a little protection that's happening and so on. So I pay attention to that. And I might, if the dog was sitting, see, can I work a little bit around the tail as the dog is sitting? Do I need to ask the dog to get up and move a little bit and add a little bit of the tail work when I'm in the groundwork? If the dog's tail is down, I often use the back of my hand and either on top of the tail with this little dog or under the tail. When they are comfortable with us running our hand along the tail, we want to keep an open hand so we're not grabbing the tail. That wouldn't be very comfortable for most dogs. So I'm going to just keep an open hand around the tail. I can circle the tail. I can gently move the vertebrae, but very, very gently. Can rotate the base. And the tail will give you a lot of information about the dog's level of concern. And many times just doing something as simple as taking the back of the hand and stroking under the tail, moving on again and adding a little pieces to it will make a huge difference in the dog being able to accept the tail work. So you can see here, this is, the dog is sitting when I went to touch her tail. So I started by just doing some raccoon touches along the outside of the tail. Just very, very light touches as far along as she was comfortable. And I pay attention to when her response. She starts to move away. She starts to look a little concerned. I'm going to at least pause. Then I took the back of my hand and I went down either side of the hindquarters and then onto the tail so that she can realize what it is that I'm going to do. Because sometimes when we do something that's unfamiliar, it's literally the unfamiliarity for them that is the concern rather than necessarily what we're doing. So in this picture, the next one, I'm just taking the back of my hand and running it underneath the tail. So if the tail is really clamped, this is going to be much easier for most dogs to accept than if we have an open hand holding the tail. So now I've got my one hand is lightly under her belly. So I'm not making her stand, but I'm just kind of asking her, could she stand? And then I had an open hand down the tail. And then in the middle one with a gently, my hand again is open as I'm moving the tail and gently purling the vertebrae. And in the last picture, there's a little glide along the tail, which really helps to affect the whole spine. Really pay attention to your dogs. Do this in moments rather than minutes. And what I found is that if I have a dog whose tail is really clamped to their body, that's where I've also found that a wrap, and we'll get into the lifts with wraps in the leg work, can be very helpful in just changing how they feel about having their tails touched. So the ТиТач belly lifts are so fantastic. And, you know, we started these with horses and we found that they're also extremely useful for dogs as well. So they can help release tension in the back. Very good for pregnant bitches. The back gets pulled down with the weight of the puppies, or during birthing, in which case I may do it with one hand, but that's going to depend so much on your dog. With digestive issues, doing this very, very gently can be extremely helpful, can help to improve balance, because often when dogs are actually quite nervous and tense, they are not very good with their core muscles. So they actually can't even lift a leg as if you ask them to pick up one leg or the other. The belly lifts can help to just give them a sense that they can shift and move their weight into different positions. It can really help diminish any ticklish response they may have under the belly and reduce timidity and nervousness. Now, if we think about the whole vagal nerve process and how the connection of it to the belly, that the digestive aids and being able to do this to help your dog could be really helpful. Very, very beneficial for your dog. So to do this, you want to use, I often use an elastic bandage. You can use a towel or you can use your hands. With the elastic bandage, I place it under the belly. Let's see if I can get you so you can see this. And, you know, of course you want to be careful and aware of how your dog feels about it. So you'll see in the photographs that I'm not really standing over the dog, just mostly to the side of the dog. And then I'm just going to hold on one side. I can really gently stretch the wrap, but just a bit, pause, and then slowly carry it back down. Your dog will tell you if this is okay, because if they're moving away and moving around, it's not okay for them. So you may find with those dogs that using your hand, either the back of the hand is what I often will go to, or the palm, depending again on how much tension your dog may hold in their belly. You can also do it with a towel. If you use a towel, you have to use a very, very gentle lift because there's not as much give as there is in a wrap. So remember, it's on the carry down that you really see the kind of release happening through the back, and you feel it should you feel this yourself. So here's an example. You can see with the folded wrap, and my arm is reaching over her, but my whole body is not reaching over her. So you can either do a little, like stretch the wrap just a bit with both hands, or you could stabilize with one hand and do a little lift or a little stretch with the other hand. Here I'm using the back of my hand to go under the belly to make sure that she's okay with it, and doing just a little bit of a lift. And of course, in the upper picture with the wrap, you've seen that I've moved back slightly with the wrap. Handling the feet. And this is an area that so many people have some difficulties with toenail trimming. And so this can be great preparation for toenail trimming. And even if you're not going to do the toenail trimming yourself, if you can prepare your dog for it, it's going to make it easier when they do go to the groomers or the vet, whoever does do their nails. Can help make it easier to examine the paws, can make cleaning their paws easier. When they come in and their paws are muddy, they're comfortable with having them handled. That can make a big difference. It can actually help to improve balance, which helps to improve self-confidence. So how do we start? Well, if your dog is really nervous, you may not even start with your hand. You may start with an extension of your hand, a paintbrush, like an artist paintbrush or any sort of a paintbrush that you have. We've used feathers going down the legs, something that is not what your animal expects. And this is where often starting on the shoulder, and you're going to start with the back of the hand. This is a little bit awkward so you can see. Obviously my hand won't be quite twisted like this. And just start even to start to slowly go down the leg. And just notice how your dog feels about it. In my experience, most dogs that are difficult with their feet and legs are more comfortable when you're using the back or side of your hand than they are when you use the palm. And it'll happen immediately that they're better. So you could also do some llama touch down the leg. You could use the banana slug, and the banana slug is using the side of the outside of just below your little finger, and that soft piece between your wrist and along your palm, going down the legs. That's another step towards having your palm on. And then you can do raccoon touch circles down the legs. You could do some python lifts if your dog is comfortable. Tiny dogs, it's a little tricky. So most of the time you would be doing them just with one hand and very lightly. Just have to see how your dog is in accepting it. Now, if they're very difficult, I actually take this into movement work. So I might use, like we do with the horses, we use a wand, which is a stiff dressage whip or something that you can kind of stroke down the legs. But if you do it in the context of using the groundwork or using the playground of higher learning, it changes the experience for the dog. So here are some pictures of using the llama touch to go down the legs. And starting at the shoulder, not going directly to the foot. And then just running the hand down. This is going into the banana slug. And then doing some touches around the paw. Now I've chosen to use a sponge, and that's another thing that you can use. It's something that's not your hand so that you're giving them a different experience. And you can add the clicker to this depending on what you're training, but use some positive reinforcement for the dog so that we change the unpleasant experience into something that is more pleasant. Now, I sometimes use the sponge or sheepskin, a sheepskin car wash mitt can be really helpful. And I'll take the dog's paw and I'll put it either onto the sponge or some other piece of material. And I actually circle, my hand is the paw, I circle the paw around that area so that I'm giving them the feedback about something happening in the pads that's different than your hand. And then I'm also let her paw rest on the sponge, and I'm using touches around the pads to get her more comfortable with that. So when we do leg circles, and we do this, of course, with horses a great deal, but we can also do this with dogs. So I like to start by stroking down the back with the leg with the back of my hand. And when you pick up the joints, and this is the tricky piece, this picture is really nicely shows how the leg is being supported under the elbow, and the joints, just asking the dog to actually bend the joints as opposed to pulling the leg out to the side, because sometimes people go to pick up the leg, but the dog's not actually softening through the joint. So that's really, really important. Make sure that you keep the leg under the shoulder or the hip to help the dog maintain balance. Otherwise, pulling them out of balance really doesn't make them feel particularly safe. We might just do a couple of circles in each direction and then place the paw back down. Now, if a dog really has poor core muscles, it'll be extremely difficult, or a lot of pain in the back. It could be extremely difficult for them to do these leg circles while they're standing up. So you could also start with the dog lying on their side. And I often use wraps to do this so that it's not my hand. You could use your hand gently underneath the leg to move it. What I find with the wraps is it makes the animal feel a little bit safer because you can't force the leg in any position, and your hands will really tend to stay softer. So I'll just slide the wrap underneath the upper arm and do a very gentle lift. Sometimes I do a tiny little rolling motion, and then I slowly carry it back down. And it can be amazing to see the response. You can't do it if they're not comfortable with it. They will object, and that is not the point of this exercise. Now we can also do a back leg. And with this dog, I worked my way to the back because I didn't know this, but I would do this anyway, is that she was quite sensitive about her hind legs being handled. And so I started with a sponge, and I worked along the body with the sponge first. And then you could do chimp touches or lying leopards on the thigh and the hindquarters before you slip the wrap under the leg, so that the dog really knows that you're there and it's okay with them. Now, having the wrap under the leg rather than your hand is just much more gentle in being able to make contact for the dog. So I'll see if I can get some video for you of me doing this exercise. But I think that you'll find that if you can work on the extremities, it makes a huge difference to many, many dogs.